Welcome to my channel, and enjoy watching. Trapped in the freezing Draven Peaks with enemy forces closing in, Navy medic Kira Linton faces impossible odds until a ghost from her past emerges. Precision shots, surgical takedowns, and a hidden identity that could change everything. Who is the legendary ghost rifle? Snow hissed against my face as it piled over the ridges of the Draven Peaks. I pressed my back against the icy rock, feeling the wind slice through my uniform. 8 of us huddled together, the Navy unit tense, hearts hammering under the weight of exhaustion and fear. Ammo was running low, and what remained was barely usable. The enemy was closing in from every side, their shouting bouncing off the canyon walls like a chorus of doom. I took a deep breath, letting my lungs fill with the cold, thin air. Captain Elias Rourke crouched beside me, lowering his voice to the team. "This is it," he said. "It's done." The attackers surged, their voices cutting through the wind. "American soldiers, surrender now," they yelled. Then came a crack across the ridge. One rifle shot. Then another. Men fell, one by one, snow blooming red around them. Each strike was perfect, surgical, almost unreal. I froze, barely daring to breathe. Who could have appeared here, now, at our lowest moment, and wielded such deadly precision? I forced my mind to focus. The Korvax Mountains were merciless, and so was the fight ahead. We'd been marching for hours, long enough for the cold to sink into our bones, long enough for my glasses to fog over with every exhale. I adjusted my pack and gritted my teeth. I wasn't here to die. Not today. At 31, I was older than most of the unit, but I blended in as best I could, quiet, competent. My medical pack was slung across my back, filled with supplies, trauma kits, and the promise of survival. My M4 rested at my side. To most, I was just Dr. Kira Linton, the medic, but I'd carried more than that for years. I'd carried the skill, the training, and the memory of a father who had taught me how to fire a rifle before I could even drive a car. Lieutenant Jonas Mercer, 23, muttered something under his breath as he glanced at me stumbling over the snow. He didn't know me, but he'd noticed soon enough that I wasn't as fragile as I looked. The intel we'd been given warned of civilians in the target zone, wounded innocents that needed treatment. That's why I was here. That's why I had to be useful. I moved with the group, offering water and protein bars, slipping hand warmers into gloves. Quiet gestures, nothing flashy. Yet beneath that surface, I scanned the canyon constantly, noting every ridge, every potential approach, every place an enemy might hide. A sniper's instincts never left you, even when you tried to bury them. Rourke noticed my grip on my rifle. "Where'd you learn that hold?" he asked once. I shrugged. "Basics," I said. "Same as everyone else." But I knew he wasn't convinced. He'd seen the subtle way my hands remembered every drill, every calculated motion. And he didn't know the half of it. The mission seemed simple at the start. Neutralize a dozen or so targets, get out before dawn. But I'd learned the hard way that a simple mission was never simple. The quiet ones who underestimated the terrain, the enemy, or us rarely left alive. I brushed my gloved fingers over the silver chain at my neck, the last memento from my father. He'd started me with a .22, then graduated me to his precision rifle. He told me once that aim was nothing without judgment, the ability to know exactly when to pull the trigger. And that had been drilled into me from 12 until 16, when he died, leaving only the rifle and his lessons behind. I joined the service at 18, not for glory, but because it was all I had left of family. For years, I'd sworn I'd bury the parts of me that killed and focus only on saving lives. Yet tonight, in the shadow of the Draven Peaks, that part of me was stirring. The squad tightened formation, unaware that the phantom whispered about in classified files might already be among them. And if the first shot had already taken out half a dozen attackers, it hadn't been me. Not yet. I tightened the straps on my pack and followed the team into the valley. Every step felt like walking into a storm, and I knew the calm was only temporary. Somewhere, hidden in the snow and the shadows, a test awaited. And when it came, I'd have to decide whether I remained just Kira, the healer, or became something far more dangerous. The snow crunched under my boots as we moved deeper into the valley, shadows stretching like fingers across frozen rock. Captain Rourke led, scanning the compound ahead, counting buildings, noting exits. It seemed quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that smells like a trap. We had been warned of minimal resistance, 12 hostiles, maybe 15. The briefing had promised a fast strike and a clean extraction. I had heard that song before. My gut told me the intel was lying. Minimal resistance often meant someone had no idea what was waiting. Lieutenant Mercer's breathing hitched beside me. "Why does it feel off?" he whispered. I didn't answer. My eyes swept the ridges. 3 snipers could dominate this valley without even showing themselves. A mortar could turn us into snow-covered corpses in seconds. We stopped near a cluster of brick houses clinging to the riverbed like petrified roots. Rourke motioned us forward. Snow muffled our steps, but the wind carried every sound farther than it should have. I stayed close to Mercer, offering a protein bar, the small gestures a reminder of normalcy. Then chaos erupted. A mortar slammed into the path ahead, exploding with a roar that shook the canyon. Metal shards and frozen debris screamed past us. The world tilted, and instinct overtook thought. Gunfire erupted from hidden positions along the ridges. We were in a killing zone, pinned by crossfire, our exit cut off. "Take cover," Rourke shouted, diving behind a boulder. I dropped beside Mercer, blood already seeping from a wound in his leg. "Stay still," I said, my hands moving automatically, pressing gauze into the bleeding, pushing morphine into his veins. Combat medic training had taught me to prioritize, to move fast, to act even when everything screamed to run. The enemy had taken the high ground, their machine guns hammering the snow around us. My vision narrowed. Each shot, each movement became a calculation. Distance, wind, angle, timing. My heart pounded, but my hands were calm. Muscle memory does that. It overrides panic. "Medic," Mercer gasped, his voice shaky. "They're going to." I silenced him with a hand on his chest. "Focus on staying alive," I said. My eyes swept the canyon. They were organized, methodical, and they thought they had us trapped. That illusion was about to end. I reached for my pack, not for bandages, not for meds, but for something I hadn't touched in years. Hidden under waterproof wrappings lay my father's gift, the M24 sniper rifle system, disassembled, each part packed with care. It had been forbidden for years. I had promised myself I would never use it again. But 8 of us were staring death in the face, and some promises had to bend. Time slowed as I reassembled the rifle, each piece clicking into place with the precision drilled into me since childhood. In less than 2 minutes, the medic was gone, replaced by something else. Kira Linton was still there, but so was the phantom from my past, the one the intel had whispered about in hushed tones, the ghost rifle. I crawled to a vantage point, snow and rock masking my presence. Through the scope, the valley opened like a chessboard. Riflemen shifting, demolition crews prepped explosives, squads advancing. The first shot went off. A Taliban gunner froze, then collapsed. Not a scream, not a flinch, just silence and snow. The SEALs froze, eyes wide. Who fired that?" Rourke shouted. I didn't answer. I was already on the next target, and the next, methodically dismantling their attack with surgical precision. Every round was deliberate. Every shot accounted for. My pulse matched the rhythm of the rifle, every breath synchronized with the trigger pull. Time didn't exist beyond the scope, beyond the calculations, beyond the moment a life hung in the balance. And as the enemy began to scatter, disoriented and terrified, I felt the old calm that had once made me a nightmare in other wars settle over me. The quiet valley turned into chaos. And in that chaos, I realized something vital. Some parts of us never vanish. They wait. They bide their time. And when the moment comes, they rise again. The snow had turned to slush under our boots as we pressed deeper into the valley. My heart was calm, my focus razor-sharp. Every movement I made was precise, deliberate. The ghost rifle was an extension of my own body now, each breath synchronized with each shot. From my vantage point, I could see the enemy reorganizing. They weren't used to being cut down like this. Fear rippled through their ranks, and for the first time tonight, we had the upper hand. But upper hand in war was fragile, fleeting. Lieutenant Mercer groaned behind me. His leg was bleeding heavily, but his eyes followed every shot I took. "Doc, I didn't think. You'll live," I said, though my voice carried no warmth. I pressed a bandage tighter over his wound. My mind, however, was already calculating the next kill zone. The valley funneled their movement like water. I had them pinned, but I couldn't stay still for long. Captain Rourke was shouting orders now, rallying the remaining team. Sergeant Malik Vega and Corporal Deacon Holt flanked the east ridge, trying to stabilize what remained of our perimeter. But even they were outnumbered and outgunned. It would take more than brute force to survive. Through the scope, I tracked their movements. 3 fighters moving toward a concealed machine gun, a demolition team prepping explosives near a supply cache. Each target required judgment, precision, and timing. My father's voice echoed in my memory. Accuracy is a gift. Wisdom is knowing when to use it. I exhaled slowly, lining up my first calculated shot. Distance, wind, gravity, pulse. Fire. The first enemy fell. Not a scream, not a struggle, just silence and snow. I moved seamlessly to the next. Shot 2, shot 3. Their formation faltered, and panic spread like wildfire. I watched as fighters abandoned cover, tried to retreat, and realized too late they had nowhere to run. Behind me, I heard Rourke's voice. "It's a sniper," someone shouted. "We've got allied sniper support." I ignored them. I had no interest in recognition tonight. My team's survival depended on restraint as much as precision. Each bullet was calculated. Weapon first, then leader, then collapse their lines. Waste nothing. Take only what is necessary. The snow around me muffled my movements, masking my presence. I shifted positions after every few shots, never staying long in one place. The ghost rifle had taught me patience, discipline, and discretion. In a world obsessed with power, this was the truest power I possessed. Then I saw him, the enemy commander, standing tall, rallying the remaining fighters with unwavering confidence. One shot could end him, but the timing had to be perfect. I steadied my breath, waited for the slight sway of his movement, calculated the trajectory, and fired. He dropped instantly. The last thread of organized resistance in the valley snapped, and chaos turned to collapse. The remaining fighters scattered into the darkness, leaving weapons and pride behind. I lowered the rifle, my hands steady. My breathing was controlled. Mercer's wide eyes met mine, disbelief and awe reflected in them. "Doc, you're the ghost." I didn't answer. The moment was over. The battle was won. The quiet medic had transformed into the phantom they had whispered about across 3 continents. But as I slipped back into my pack, concealing the rifle beneath bandages and supplies, I reminded myself I was still Kira Linton. The healer. That part of me hadn't vanished. It had just taken the shape the moment demanded. The team moved to secure the valley. Captain Rourke's eyes caught mine, recognition flashing briefly. He didn't need words. He knew. We had survived against impossible odds. And though the ghost rifle would remain a legend whispered in files and stories, it was nothing compared to the lives we had saved tonight. The wind had dropped, leaving a brittle silence over the Draven Peaks. Snowflakes drifted lazily down, dusting over the carnage below. I slid from my vantage point, keeping low, my hands brushing the snow as I moved back to the team. The rifle was packed away, hidden beneath layers of medical gear, a ghostly presence nobody would notice. Lieutenant Mercer tried to sit upright, wincing as he tested his leg. I don't know what just happened," he muttered, his voice hoarse. Blood streaked his uniform, but he was alive. That was what mattered. I tightened the bandages and applied a cold compress to his wound. "Focus on staying conscious," I said quietly. Captain Rourke swept the area with his binoculars, muttering orders to Vega and Holt. "Sweep the ridge. Make sure no stragglers are left." His gaze lingered on me longer than necessary. I ignored it, focusing on my team. I couldn't let admiration or fear distract me. The valley was a graveyard. Weapons littered the snow, bodies frozen in positions of shock or desperation. Each movement we made required caution: traps, explosives, snipers hidden among the rocks. Even victory had its dangers. I crouched beside Mercer, checking circulation and administering 4 fluids. My hands moved mechanically, trained to soothe and stabilize. The medic side of me was back in control, yet every so often, my fingers itched to touch the rifle, to feel the weight, the precision, the power. I shoved the thought aside. That side of me belonged to the shadows. Vega approached, scanning the perimeter. "Every shot flawless," he said, voice tinged with awe. "I've never seen precision like that." I gave a brief nod, saying nothing. Praise was not part of my job description. Not tonight. Tonight, the ghost rifle had saved lives. And lives, not accolades, were my concern. Mercer, still pale, looked up at me. "Doc, who are you really?" His words hung in the cold air. I hesitated. I could tell him, reveal the past I had buried, the missions nobody knew about. But there was a line between who I had been and who I had chosen to be. "I'm someone who does what's needed," I said softly, keeping my voice calm. Rourke approached, surveying the valley one last time. "This is unreal," he muttered under his breath, almost to himself. I sensed the calculation in his eyes, the recognition of something he hadn't seen in years. Something dangerous, precise, unstoppable. I stayed on the team's flank, scanning for threats that were no longer there. Each movement felt deliberate, almost ritualistic. My father's lessons whispered through my mind. Patience, control, timing. It wasn't just about killing. It was about knowing when to intervene, when to save, when to let the moment pass. The team began moving toward extraction points, careful not to disturb what remained. I adjusted Mercer's pack, checking his foreline and stabilizing his leg further. "We're leaving," I said softly, more to myself than him. The valley had exacted its price, and it was time to retreat. Even as we moved, the memory of the shots, the fear in the enemy's eyes, and the calculated destruction I had caused lingered. I had transformed, even if only for a moment, into the ghost rifle. And though the world would never know, though the stories would circulate quietly in special operations files, I understood one thing clearly. Some parts of us never truly vanish. They wait, and when called upon, they rise. By the time we reached the base of the canyon, snow had begun to fall heavier, covering tracks, erasing evidence. The team's breathing was ragged, their bodies battered, but alive. That was victory. Not glory, not recognition. Survival. I tucked the rifle deep into my pack again, hiding it beneath the familiar weight of trauma kits and bandages. No one needed to see it. No one needed to know. I was still Kira Linton, medic, healer, the quiet one in the corner. And that was enough. But even as I helped Mercer into the extraction vehicle, I felt the pull of the other side, the one trained for precision, for deadly calm, for exacting justice when lives hung in the balance. The ghost rifle was asleep again, for now, but I knew it would awaken when necessary. We reached the extraction point as dawn broke over the Draven Peaks, the first pale light scattering across frozen stone. The helicopter's rotors whipped snow into the air, but we barely noticed. Our focus was on survival, on getting off the mountains alive. Lieutenant Mercer sat heavily on the cold metal floor, his bandaged legs stretched out before him. He kept glancing at me, as if trying to reconcile the quiet medic he knew with the lethal precision he had witnessed moments ago. I met his eyes briefly and gave the faintest nod. It had to be done. Captain Rourke was coordinating a fast debrief over secure comms. All units accounted for. Enemy neutralized. Casualties minimal, he reported. But we need full sitrep as soon as we land. I stayed quiet, focusing on Mercer, monitoring vitals, adjusting for lines. My hands moved almost without thought, my body remembering rhythms drilled over years of trauma care. But my mind drifted back to the valley, the calculated shots, the way fear spread like wildfire, the feel of the rifle resting against my shoulder. That side of me, the ghost rifle, hadn't disappeared. It had simply returned to its shadows, waiting. The rotor wash stung my face as we lifted off. Below us, the Draven Peaks lay quiet once more, a frozen battlefield that would never tell its full story. The helicopter's interior smelled of cold metal and antiseptic. Soldiers murmured softly, tending to minor injuries, recounting flashes of the firefight. No one mentioned my part. I didn't need them to. Back at base, the debrief was already underway. Analysts and intelligence officers crowded around screens and maps, scanning every possible variable. I filed in quietly, keeping to the edges, adjusting my glasses as I listened. The report called it an unexpectedly effective elimination of enemy forces, but they had no idea how it had happened. Not a clue. Rourke caught my eye from across the room. For a moment, he studied me, almost searching, almost guessing. I gave nothing away. I was Kira, medic. That was all they needed to know. Later, in the solitude of the medical bay, I cleaned Mercer's leg one last time, making sure no infection would set in. His eyes followed my hands with a mixture of reverence and confusion. I still can't. I mean you. Doc, you were. I shook my head gently. Focus on healing. That's all that matters. My voice was soft but firm. Some things were not for explanation. Some truths were too dangerous to speak aloud. But whispers were already stirring elsewhere. Classified chatter, quiet talk among officers who had heard rumors of the ghost rifle, someone who had vanished years ago, only to reappear in a moment of extreme necessity. They didn't know it was me. Not yet. That night, I cleaned my equipment in silence, arranging bandages, syringes, and trauma kits with meticulous care. Beneath the familiar weight of my medical supplies, the M24 remained hidden, wrapped as it always was. I hadn't touched it since the engagement, but I felt its presence like a pulse beneath my fingertips. Memories surfaced, the missions in forgotten theaters, the ones buried in redacted reports, the ones that had cost me people I cared about. My father's lessons, patience, timing, restraint. They weren't just techniques, they were philosophy. A way to survive when everything else seemed lost. I placed the rifle back beneath the medical supplies, concealing it from the world. Some things were too dangerous to display. Some skills were too heavy to carry openly. And yet, in the quiet of the night, I realized that those skills were not gone. They were part of me, dormant but ready. I was Kira Linton, healer. But I also knew, if fate demanded, the ghost rifle would rise again. And when it did, the world would not forget. The base was alive with quiet tension the next morning. Analysts combed through mission data, satellite feeds, and after-action reports. Their faces were pale from long nights and low caffeine, but their focus was razor-sharp. Somewhere in their minds, a single anomaly loomed: the sudden, surgical elimination of enemy forces in the Draven Valley. No one could explain it. Captain Rourke gave me a nod as I passed him in the hallway, his eyes holding a mix of respect and something unspoken. He didn't need to ask questions. He had seen it, the precision, the calm, the efficiency. But others would. Intelligence officers, senior analysts, those who tracked ghost operations for years. Lieutenant Mercer, still limping from his wound, followed me into the medical bay. His voice was hesitant. Doc, the team's talking. They know someone changed the battle for us. I didn't look up from the supplies I was organizing. Let them think what they want. It's not about recognition. It's about survival. He frowned. But it was you. I paused, letting a fraction of silence answer him. Some truths were heavy. Some memories were sharper than bullets. I did what was necessary, I said finally. Nothing more. Even as I spoke, I knew whispers were spreading. The ghost rifle, an enigma that had haunted classified NATO files for years, was back in action. Analysts and operatives who believed the legend dead would start connecting dots. Mission debriefs, eyewitness accounts, unusual precision, all would point toward someone. Someone familiar. Someone gone for years. That evening, I received a secure message on my terminal. A brief note. Confirm, subject alive. Status, operational? My pulse quickened slightly, just enough to remind me that the world I had left behind still wanted to know about me. I typed a measured response. Confirmed. Operational. Status, civilian in current context. Even hidden, my past had a way of surfacing. Reports, rumors, and classified chatter had a gravity of their own. Soon, there would be questions. Soon, there would be scrutiny. But tonight, I had Mercer to tend to, injuries to stabilize, and the quiet satisfaction that the team had survived. That was enough. Later, as the sun dipped behind distant ridges, I walked the perimeter alone. Snow dusted the equipment lockers, and the valley beyond the base stretched endlessly. I thought about the Draven Peaks, about the shots, the precision, the fear in the enemy's eyes. Each calculation, each movement had been part of a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. And yet, it hadn't corrupted me. It had saved lives. A faint chime echoed from the terminal. Another secure message. This one longer, more formal. Intelligence review initiated. Declassified operations referenced. Subject ghost rifle. You will report for debriefing at 0800. Clearance required. I exhaled, running a gloved hand over my face. Debriefings were procedural. Dangerous in their scrutiny, yes, but also necessary. The world I had left behind, surgical precision, untraceable operations, shadows moving in silence, was trying to find me again. I had choices. I could continue hiding, remain Kira Linton, healer, or I could step into the light, even briefly, to face the past I had buried. Mercer appeared in the doorway, watching me with cautious curiosity. "You're really not going to tell anyone?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not a word. Sometimes survival depends on silence." He hesitated, then nodded, as though understanding without fully grasping the weight. The ghost rifle had returned, but it was dormant again. For now. And as I packed my medical supplies for the night, I knew one thing. The valley had tested me, revealed me, and reminded me that some skills never vanish. They wait, and when the world demands, they rise again, no matter how much you try to bury them. The debriefing room smelled of recycled air and tension. Analysts, officers, and intelligence personnel filed in, murmuring quietly over the Draven Valley engagement. I followed Captain Rourke, maintaining my measured pace, my gloved hands folded in front of me. No one yet knew the truth about me, about the ghost rifle, but the air hinted at questions that would not stay buried. Dr. Linton, a senior analyst, said, his eyes scanning the digital feed, "We're aware of the unusual engagement. Precision fire, minimal casualties on your side. Can you provide insight?" I held his gaze steadily. "I treated injuries. I coordinated medevac. That's all." I left it at that. A pause, a careful silence. That was enough. Behind me, Mercer shifted uneasily. His leg was still weak, but his gaze followed mine. I could see the flicker of curiosity, disbelief, and lingering awe. He knew, at least partly. He had seen the precision, the calm, the way the battlefield had bent to a single, disciplined hand. But he said nothing. The senior analyst frowned, glancing at Rourke. "You were on site. You saw the enemy collapse, yet no snipers were reported from allied units. Can you confirm?" I nodded slowly. "I confirm no external snipers. Beyond that, I have nothing to add." Their eyes lingered on me longer than necessary. The legend had whispers. Someone had seen it. Someone had called it ghost rifle. I had only heard of it in briefings, in the hush of officers who spoke of classified operations and untraceable missions. I had buried it years ago, but now, the whispers would find life again. Rourke placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. Quiet reassurance, nothing more. He didn't need to remind me of the battlefield. We had survived it together. But the analysts would dig. Files would be opened. Questions asked. I had choices: hide or navigate the scrutiny with the same precision I had used on the battlefield. Later, the team gathered in a small briefing room. Vega and Holt exchanged glances, still shaken from the night before. Mercer sat silently, watching me with a mixture of awe and unease. "You didn't have to," he finally said. "I did what had to be done," I replied quietly. "That's all there is to it." Yet I knew the world outside this room wouldn't see it that way. The ghost rifle would not remain a whisper. Debriefs, classified channels, and security files were like rivers. Information flowed eventually, no matter how tightly you tried to dam it. That evening, in the quiet of the medical bay, I cleaned my instruments again, methodical, deliberate. Beneath the trauma kits, the M24 lay hidden. I hadn't touched it since the fight, but it hummed in my mind, a reminder of the precision, the calm, and the burden of choice. I knew the truth. Someone would eventually trace the ghost rifle signature. Someone would ask, probe, investigate. And when they did, I would be ready, not to display, not to boast, but to navigate with care, to protect what needed protection, to preserve lives. Mercer's voice interrupted my thoughts. "You ever regret it?" I paused, gloved hands resting on the counter. "No," I said finally. "Regret is wasted energy. I did what was necessary. Lives were saved. That is enough." He didn't reply, just nodded, understanding as much as he could without seeing the weight I carried. Some knowledge was too heavy for words. Some skills, too precise to explain. And as night fell over the base, I realized one undeniable truth. The ghost rifle was no longer just a legend in classified files. It had returned to the world, subtle, hidden, and powerful. And while I remained Kira Linton, medic, healer, quiet and observant, a part of me lingered in the shadows, ready, patient, waiting for the moment it might rise again. The days following the Draven Valley engagement passed in a blur of reports, cleanings, and quiet observation. The team rotated through recovery, medevac checks, and debriefs, but I remained vigilant. Even as I bandaged minor cuts and checked vitals, a part of my mind never left the valley. The ghost rifle's rhythm, the calm precision, the way fear spread across the enemy like wildfire. It lingered, haunting yet comforting. It wasn't just the mission that demanded attention. I noticed subtle changes. Extra glances from intelligence officers, whispered discussions in secure corridors, analysts scanning mission logs with more intensity than protocol required. The world had remembered the ghost rifle, even if it hadn't realized who it had witnessed. Captain Rourke approached me one evening, a folder in hand. "Kira, this isn't about the team. It's above our level. HQ wants to sit down. They've seen anomalies in the engagement. They're curious." I didn't flinch. Curiosity rarely ends well. He sighed, giving a subtle shrug. "Sometimes it's unavoidable. You'll need to go." I nodded slowly, weighing my choices. I had hidden for years, built a life around healing instead of destruction. Yet my past was a shadow, always present, ready to resurface. To ignore it entirely was impossible. That night, I returned to the medical bay alone, cleaning instruments in methodical silence. My fingers brushed the M24 hidden beneath the trauma kits. It hummed softly in my mind, a reminder of what I had once been and what I could be again if necessary. I didn't touch it, not tonight. I simply acknowledged its presence. The ghost rifle didn't need to be used to exist. Its mere memory was enough to demand respect. Lieutenant Mercer found me there, leaning against a counter, lost in thought. "You're not just a medic, are you?" His voice was careful, almost reverent. I let a moment of silence answer. Some truths were too heavy, too dangerous for the casual observer. "I'm what I need to be when lives are at stake," I said finally. "That's all anyone needs to know." He nodded, understanding only partially, yet enough. "If you ever decide to go back," his voice trailed off, the thought unspoken. I didn't answer. I knew the truth. The ghost rifle was part of me, and some parts of ourselves never truly vanish. They lie dormant, patient, waiting for the moment the world demands them again. The following morning, I was escorted to a secure briefing room. Analysts, intelligence officers, and a few senior military liaisons were present. Digital feeds of the Draven Valley engagement scrolled on the walls. The enemy collapse, the precision strikes, the unusual efficiency. All were visible, but explanations were absent. A senior officer fixed me with a steady gaze. "Dr. Linton, you were present during the engagement. We've noted extraordinary outcomes. Can you clarify the source of these results?" I kept my composure, gloved hands folded neatly in front of me. "I treated injuries. I coordinated evacuation. Beyond that, I have no further information." His eyes narrowed, but he made no immediate accusation. Reports, rumors, whispers, they were dangerous, yes. But sometimes restraint was the best answer. I had spent years perfecting silence as a weapon almost as lethal as the rifle I had once wielded. As I walked back to my quarters, the weight of observation pressed lightly on my shoulders. The world had noticed, and curiosity had turned into scrutiny. But even under their watchful eyes, I was still Kira Linton. Healer, medic, quiet presence in the background. The ghost rifle, my hidden identity, remained in the shadows, patient, waiting for the next impossible moment. The next week was a blur of quiet observation and subtle interrogation. Analysts combed through satellite feeds, engagement logs, and team communications, their curiosity sharpening like a blade. The Draven Valley operation had left anomalies, too precise, too coordinated, too surgical to be coincidence. They wanted answers, and I knew I had to walk a careful line. Captain Rourke stayed close, watching without interfering. "Kira," he said one morning, "they're going to push. They'll want access to classified files, redacted mission reports. Be ready." I nodded. My hands adjusted my glasses, habit and caution intertwined. Years ago, I would have faced the scrutiny head-on, unflinching. Today, restraint was weaponized. The ghost rifle existed in whispers and shadows, not in explanations. I spent hours in the medical bay, attending minor injuries, reorganizing supplies, yet my mind lingered on the valley, the shots, the rhythm of calculated precision. The ghost rifle was patient. Its memory lived in my hands, the steady motion of my fingers, the way I measured distance and timing without conscious thought. Then came the inquiry. Analysts requested declassified files from my past, spanning years that were officially blank. Missions in abandoned theaters, operations buried under redacted labels, actions never acknowledged publicly. They were curious, dangerous, yes, but also necessary. A senior officer, eyes sharp, addressed me directly. Dr. Linton, we have gaps in operational data that correspond with the Draven engagement. The level of precision observed. We need to understand who is capable of this. Who executed these actions? I let the silence linger, letting the weight of my calmness answer more than words could. I do not have knowledge of what you're asking, I said softly. No hesitation, no tremor, just measured certainty. Mercer appeared beside me afterward, voice low. They're talking about Ghost Rifle. They know it exists. They're looking for it. I exhaled quietly. It exists in files, in rumors, in whispers, not in what you see here. I gestured to the medical bay. I'm still Kira Linton. That's what matters. But even as I spoke, I knew some parts of the world would not accept silence. Analysts would dig, officers would question, and the memory of precision would demand a traceable source. I had left that life behind, rebuilt it around healing, but the Ghost Rifle never truly vanished. It was always there, patient, waiting for moments like Draven Valley. That evening, as snow fell lightly over the base, I cleaned instruments with deliberate care, each motion a ritual. Beneath the trauma kits, the rifle rested silently, hidden. Its presence reminded me of what I had been capable of and what I might need to be again. I reflected on the choice I had made in the valley. I had risen not for glory, not for recognition, but because 8 lives hung in balance. That moment had demanded a part of me I had long thought buried. And while the world now noticed the echoes of that precision, I had no intention of unveiling the person behind it. Captain Rourke passed by, his eyes catching mine for the briefest instant. Unspoken understanding passed between us. The Ghost Rifle was dormant, but alive. And if fate demanded, it would rise again, steady, patient, and precise. Mercer, watching quietly, muttered, "You can't stay hidden forever." I allowed a ghost of a smile, the barest acknowledgement. "Some parts of us never vanish," I said. "They wait. And when the moment comes, they rise." The snow whispered against the windows, covering tracks outside. Inside, the weight of the past and the burden of choice pressed lightly but persistently. The Ghost Rifle had returned to the shadows, and for now, I would keep it there. But I knew its patience was infinite, and so was mine. The base settled into a tentative calm. Snow had begun to thaw slightly under the morning sun, the frozen peaks of Draven Valley gleaming like silver in the distance. Yet beneath the quiet, tension lingered. Analysts, officers, and intelligence operatives continued their work, poring over data, mission logs, and engagement reports. Somewhere in those lines, someone would eventually trace the whispers of the Ghost Rifle. I walked the corridors of the medical bay, attending to minor injuries and checking supplies. Mercer was seated quietly, reading, occasionally wincing at the ache in his leg. Vega and Holt moved past, exchanging murmurs about debriefings and logistics, but none of them spoke openly about last night. None needed to. Captain Rourke approached, his footsteps deliberate. "Kira," he said softly, "you know they're going to keep digging. They'll find traces, files, rumors, even team testimonies." I met his eyes evenly. "Let them search," I said. "What they find won't change what happened. And it won't change what I am now." He nodded, a flicker of understanding crossing his weathered face. "Still, you saved 8 lives, and the rest of us." That night, it was more than skill. It was courage. I allowed myself a brief, almost imperceptible smile. "Courage is just a choice," I said. "I did what was necessary. Nothing more, nothing less." That night, I sat alone in the quiet of the medical bay. The rifle remained hidden beneath layers of trauma kits, its presence almost ceremonial. I cleaned instruments methodically, each motion deliberate, meditative. Memories of the valley flickered behind my eyelids. The icy wind, the snow, the rhythm of precise shots, the lives balanced between survival and death. And then I allowed myself to acknowledge it. The Ghost Rifle was a part of me. Not all of me, not the whole, but a part that could not be erased. A part that waited for moments when lives hung in balance, when precision was life and hesitation was death. It was a tool, a memory, a discipline, and it would rise again if necessary. Mercer appeared quietly at the doorway. You ever regret it? He asked. I looked up, eyes steady, voice calm. No, I did what I had to do. I saved lives. That is enough. He nodded, finally understanding in his own way. Some truths didn't need words. Some strength didn't need recognition. The sun began to rise over the peaks, casting gold across the snow and stone. I stepped outside, feeling the chill, feeling the wind that carried the memory of the valley. 8 lives had been saved. Fear had been broken. And somewhere in the quiet, the ghost rifle rested. Not forgotten, not erased, simply waiting. I was Kira Linton, medic, healer, quiet presence in the background. But I also knew who I could be when the world demanded it. Precision, patience, and deadly calm. The ghost rifle was never gone. It had simply returned to the shadows, ready for the next impossible moment. And as I adjusted my pack and headed back to the team, I realized the truth that had guided me for years. Heroism doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits, silent, unseen, until the moment comes when the quiet ones must rise. And rise we do. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.